Yeah.
in the middle of the road. So,
Yeah.
but anyway.
Well, that's what you get for living in the woods.
It is. It is.
Even though I have plenty of deer here too. So
We have them everywhere.
Yes.
Everywhere. They're all over our yard and stuff. Yes.
Erin, where do you live?
Collegeville.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I'm up in the Scranton area.
Oh, yeah. My husband is from there originally.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Huh.
Peckville.
That's where Enterprise is. I'm going to Enterprise in Peckville.
There you go. He's actually on his way home from there now.
Oh, that's so funny. Is his family still here?
No, he unfortunately had a friend whose mom passed away. So he went up for the viewing and services yesterday and today. Yeah.
Oh,
that's really, so where did your husband go to high school?
Bishop O'Hara?
Yeah.
It no longer exists.
No, it does not. But I call it that all the time. And my kids are like, there's no such place. I'm like,
yeah, it would have been Valley View would have been his high school, his public high school.
That's so funny. And what year did he graduate?
I should probably know this, right? 95, I think it was. 95, yeah.
All right. Yeah.
Is that right? No, that's not right. 91.
91. Okay.
Making him younger than he is. That was college graduation.
Don't do that to him. Yeah.
Well, that is really funny. I grew up here. I grew up in Scranton, so I went to Scranton Prep. So.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yep.
Small world.
Small world, absolutely.
Especially that Scranton world.
Yes.
Well, I say everyone always intersects somehow with Scranton. It's amazing.
Everywhere we go. And I'll tell you this, and then I know we need to start. So when I got hired on to Cruiser Mitchell, I had worked here years ago, like 15 years ago, right out of law school, and then went and did claims for a while and then ended up coming back. And there was when I got hired on, we also hired on somebody named Bob Walsh. I don't know. He worked at the Hartford. Turns out Bob lived a quarter mile from me up the street outside of Scranton, across the street from where my kids went to preschool. I was in front of his house about 5 times a day, never met him. And then he moved to Connecticut and we got hired on a Cruiser Mitchell, and I started talking to him and we realized 5 years we lived right next to each other.
Oh my gosh, that's hysterical.
Well, and then also like I get introduced to Jen last year and we start talking and she's like, oh, I went to Scranton Prep. I was like, oh, like a lot of my friends from law school went to Scranton Prep. And then we start doing like the name dropping thing. And it's like, she knows all of my, like I had an extraordinarily large group of people that went from Scranton that graduated with me from law school. But Jen's like, I know all of those people. I'm friends with them.
Yeah.
It is I went to college with quite a few people who were from Scranton as well. So it is funny how small that area is, yet I feel like everyone has passed through there at some point.
Yeah. But at least you didn't go to University of Scranton. Like you got yourself out for a little bit.
I was gone from 18 until I was like 34 when we moved back, 33. So I was gone. We said we'd never come back. And then I had 2 kids in 20 months. And I was like, oh, okay, we're going home.
Yeah.
I mean, even today, like I was dropping my daughter off from school about 10 minutes from my house. And I hit the deer right in front of my parents' house. So I called. I was like, Dad. Of course, he was on his way to work. He turned around. He met me in his driveway. You know, that's
nice. That's a nice thing to have there.
Yeah. And where did you go to college with all the Scranton people?
I went to University of Pittsburgh.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. All right. Why don't we jump in? Because I'm like, Jen, you can't ask her where she went to college. It's part of our discussion.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Are you doing like the under the table snap? That'll work.
Muting as she's like, I'm like, come on. Like maybe I need to give them treats. I know the 2 of them are like just playing. So I apologize.
Yeah, it's fine.
The last podcast we had, somebody had a foster dog.
Man,
So
yeah, that one was fun too. The dog kept barking at something out the window, and we also recorded that like the day before Thanksgiving. I was at like my mom's house. I had like the computer on a step ladder because I didn't have like an actual place.
Well, when I told my husband this is happening, he's like, "Oh, maybe you just go up into your office and keep the dogs downstairs. And I was like, the problem is the lighting is so bad in my office. I would look like you guys were interviewing a like clandestine witness or something.
Yeah. Yes. I have had some that look like they're in the witness protection program.
My setup is not, I mean, I'm in a guest bedroom with like my Peloton behind me. I mean, but it works. Whatever.
Yeah. I'm surrounded by boxes of Christmas presents. So I did move some of them. I'm like so lazy this year with even trying to hide that there's no Santa Claus. Like they're like my daughters are 12 and 11 or 12 and 10. And I don't know where they stand. I'm not even asking about it, but I haven't been very careful about it. They're like, why do you have so many Target boxes? I'm like, well, they know I get Christmas presents too. So like, but it normally I do a better job at trying to conceal it. This year I've given up.
It happens.
Yes. Yeah. But I don't want to like be like, oh, like rip off the Band-Aid. But they're not asking because I think they just want it to be real, but they know it's not. So we're
well, and then there's always that doubt. If they admit that they don't believe in Santa, do the presents still come?
Yeah. Yeah. And
a big question out there, right?
I mean, even as an adult in college, my mom would still label gifts from Santa and gifts from her.
Oh, 100%. My daughter is 18. She is in college. I put Santa from Santa presents, and there's mom and dad presents.
Yes. So it, like even in the we'll get into the podcast in a second, but even the stupid damn elf, which I know Jen hates the elf.
Oh.
But this morning, I'm like, my 10-year-old's like, wasn't that fun today? I was like, I had them playing with Legos. I thought last night I was like, this is a creative setup I'm doing. Like I was really proud of myself. And the day before I had them hanging upside down in the bathroom. She's like, meh. Why am I even trying? I actually make them do shit this year. Normally I was just like, I would just move them around to other places around the house. I'm like, I bought one of the damn kits that like give me ideas every day.
Yeah. Those weren't around when my daughter was a believer in the elf. And it was like, you wake up in the middle of the night, you're like,
yes,
the elf. Oh my God.
Yes. I cannot deal with it. I cannot deal with it this year. My girls are also 10 and 12. They do not believe. My 12-year-olds ask if she can bring it out and hide it. And I was like, well, you can, but nobody else cares except for you. So, and then my 8-year-old son, I don't know that he ever really, he doesn't care. Do you know, I posted a LinkedIn post about him this morning. The questions he asked me just last night. He asked me, what's the meaning of life? Like, that's where he asked me if I knew what Tupac's last words were before he died.
Yeah.
Buddy, I have no idea. Like, he's a very strange kid with a very strange thought process. So I don't think he
thinker.
Oh, he was playing doctor with my niece the other day, who's 6. Like they had a little doctor kid at my parents' house the day after Thanksgiving, and they were playing, and he was like listening to her with a stethoscope and told her that she had stage 4 metastatic cancer.
Now she's terrified.
She's like, okay, what does that mean? I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Yeah, he's a weird dude, so I don't think he cares about the elf.
All right. Are we good?
All set.
All right, we're good to go. Okay. All right, I already have this recording. And I got distracted as my daughter emailed me. She's like, I'm stressed out. I have this social studies project to do. I'm like, okay, you do it tonight. Like her social studies teacher's trying to make it like fun by making them do this like Instagram post about like whatever ancient era that they are learning about. I don't know. She tried to show me yesterday. I'm like, it seems involved. Deal with it later. All right. Anyway. Okay. Ready? Okay. Yeah. Good afternoon, Erin. Welcome to Claims Never Sleep. I'm so happy to have you. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
Yes. And just so our listeners know, and you probably will clue into it, Erin has a little puppy, a new puppy that you may periodically hear in the background, just making itself known.
Squeaking away.
There's nothing like a puppy that brings joy into the holiday season.
Exactly. That was our sole mission.
Well, at least it's at a time that people are around. It can help with the potty training or the house training, I should say. Wouldn't potty training be great?
I got a dog once during the winter, and it was the worst winter ever recorded in Connecticut. We lived there at the time. And the next time we got a dog, I was like, we're doing it in May. That's it. Because I'm like standing out there shaking, holding the leash. Please go to the bathroom. Please go.
Yeah. I remember us getting a puppy when I was a kid during the winter. And then like it was one of those winters that we got a lot of snow. And then we also got invisible fencing installed at the same time. So you'd be running out there through the snow with the puppy, got back and forth to like the little flags. Oh well, but
one more thing for the holiday season.
Sure,
Exactly.
I'm sure your puppy's adorable though. And
she is a cutie, I will say that.
Well, Erin, I as you know from listening to this podcast, and everyone else knows who tunes into the podcast, you know, one of the first things I ask everybody on here is like, how did you get into claims? Because it's not something many people decide to do early on. It's usually something you fall into for a variety of reasons. So I'm curious what your path was and how you got into this claims world.
Sure. Like most people, I didn't really have any aspirations to be in the insurance world. I had completely different aspirations. While my father was an insurance executive and I would co-op and intern for his company that he worked for throughout college. When I graduated college, I had like these like very grandiose plans of joining the Peace Corps and making a difference in the world. And I went to the University of Pittsburgh, and my degree was in Latin American studies with a concentration in international business.
You're speaking Jen's language right now.
I was Latin American studies as well.
So clearly not insurance. I knew insurance from my dad. I knew insurance from, my co-op and internships, but certainly was not looking to get into the insurance world. Fast forward, you're trying to find a job. My dad had to have surgery and I was the only one not working, so to speak. So came home to help him out with things back to Philadelphia area. And the insurance company that my sister was working for was in need of a workers' compensation claims rep who could speak Spanish. And with my background being Latin American studies, I had taken Spanish for a number of years, was pretty much fluent, not anymore because it's certainly use it or lose it. Mm-hmm. And I went in to interview with them. They actually, my interview was in Spanish to make sure I could actually speak Spanish. Had no idea about workers' compensation, but they hired me. They would train me, but you can't really teach someone Spanish. That was going to be a lot more difficult. So I was hired to be an on-site adjuster, workers' compensation adjuster at a meat packaging plant.
Oh, wow.
Yes. Talk about being thrown right into the fire. They had some gnarly injuries, as you can imagine. Mm-hmm. But I will say this, that particular facility made all of the Wendy's hamburgers all up and down the East Coast. And I will still eat Wendy's to this day. The cleanest facility you can imagine. I was very impressed. I was
looking for it to go the other way. But
no, did not turn me off whatsoever.
So did you find it more difficult that you were doing a job that you were unfamiliar with in a different language?
So the reason I needed to be able to speak Spanish was because their employee base, their population was mostly all Spanish speaking. So everything that I would do from a writing and reading perspective would be in English. But when I would interview the employees, as soon as they got injured, I was, like I said, on site. I was in a job site trailer where their medical clinic was. As soon as someone would come in and be injured, I would interview them and start my investigation right there on the spot. So the purpose of me needing to know Spanish was to be able to communicate with the employees and for them to really feel comfortable with who was handling their claim. Mm-hmm. It's all about establishing that rapport very early on in the claims process and getting them to trust you, because really you're just really trying to make sure that they're okay and teaching them like, hey, don't worry about your medical benefits. If you can't work, don't worry about it. We're going to take care of you. That's the idea. Unfortunately, we're all cynics these days, and we have to prepare for the worst, but hope for the best, right? But 95% of all claims go exactly the way they're supposed to. It's that 5% that go wrong that stick in our brains and make us all jaded.
Yes, very, very true. So, well, I honestly, I think it's funny because you are one of the few people that I know, like, while you had a different path, I mean, you definitely were guided to insurance by a family member. And I think I was like kind of laughing a little bit when you said your sister was also in insurance and your dad was an insurance executive. I'm like, okay, well, it wasn't totally random.
Yeah,
you had someone
not totally
in your ear.
random. Exactly.
Yes. So, but you're at that position for a while, and then how did you eventually move into the broker world?
So when I was at that particular company, it was a monoline workers' compensation carrier. Unfortunately, they no longer exist. It was a great company. It was called EBI Companies. And they were purchased by Royal and Sun Alliance. As with so many companies, especially back in the early, 2000s, it was, some were folding like Reliance, some were being purchased by other larger organizations. And that's what happened with EBI because they were monoline workers' comp. When I was with EBI, I feel like I was pretty good with relationships. So they had me work also on other accounts for one particular broker where I kind of, engaged and worked closely with the broker and the clients to make sure things were running smoothly. And that was the Graham Company. And then the Graham Company, when EBI was purchased, asked, what my plan was. And I said, well, they want to transfer me, but I'm newly engaged. I have no interest in moving right now. And they were like, well, would you consider coming and working for us? And I was like, well, let's talk. And that's how I moved on to the Graham Company. And then they taught me every line of coverage imaginable.
Yeah. I was going to say,
for every industry.
Graham Company has a very robust training program.
They do. They do. One of the best in the industry. You got to give it to them.
And that's why they have such a great reputation,
Yep.
So, and how was that how was the transition over into to the Graham Company, into the brokerage? Like, how did you find that to be? Because it's a change, right? Now you're learning about everything.
Yeah. For me, I didn't think it was that difficult a transition other than learning the other lines of coverage. Obviously, there's, a little bit of a learning curve. But they do a phenomenal job with training. But I would say the model that EBI followed was very service intensive. So to move over to more of the service side as opposed to the claim handling was not a very difficult transition because I was so used to being so service intensive on the insurance carrier side, which isn't necessarily always the case, right? These adjusters today, they've got very large desks that they're handling, and their workloads are significant. EBI had a very different approach to things. So they kept our caseloads at a very manageable number so that you could be super service intensive. So to go over to the broker side and really be that advocate on behalf of the clients, outside of the adjusting of the claims, was a pretty easy transition for me, at least.
Mm-hmm. And, when you were learning about all the different lines and areas, like, did you have an affinity towards a particular, type of insurance line, or were you like just enjoying the variety, the spice of life?
I will say the spice of life is very nice in insurance claims because no 2 days are ever the same. No two claims are ever the same. And especially when I was at EBI and at Graham, I learned about every industry imaginable. So it wasn't just, I only worked at the meat packaging plant. Like I also handled a number of other accounts. I handled a bottling company that we all probably know and love and drink all the time, right? And I, when I was at Graham, I worked on financial institutions, pharmaceutical companies, distribution companies, construction companies. So I handled the industry, you name it. I probably did something in it. Hospitality, senior living. We did it all.
Mm-hmm. And so you're at Graham for a while. So what pushed your move someplace else? Because this is one thing I also know about Graham Company. People don't often leave.
They don't.
It's a very uncommon.
And I got to tell you, some of my best friends are still at the Graham Company. I've stayed very close with everyone there. For me, it was just a new opportunity with a different broker. And to be honest, a lot of it had to do with my family. I had a young daughter at home. My commute into the office was probably close to an hour and a half each way, depending on if you hit traffic or not, right? Which is so unpredictable. And it was at a time before people were encouraged to work from home or even permitted to work from home, right?
At that time, I think Graham Company was probably like business.
Oh, we were. I was in a suit every day. Yeah.
When you had to pay for those jean Fridays.
Once a month on a Friday, I could pay. It was like $5 or $10 to wear jeans for charity, which everyone gladly did.
Yes.
Yeah. So it just really, and I understood the position. And for me, it just, I had to do what was right for my family, with a young daughter at home, getting engaged in sports and things like that. I wanted the flexibility to be, hey, oh yeah, I'd love to coach your lacrosse team. I want to be at every game. I want to be able to volunteer at, to be the school store mom, right? Like those are the things you only get once, right? So you want to try to take advantage when you can. And so that was really the big thing that precipitated my move, to be honest.
Yeah. And it's funny because I'm sure things have changed now, but yes, it's so much of what was happening at that time. Like working from home was so abnormal. At least in in the legal industry, it was very normal. I think in claims in general, it wasn't super abnormal, but I remember at that time I had little kids as well. And I just would secretly work from home. Like I just wouldn't tell anybody. And because I'm like, you don't know where I am. Like I could be at court in God knows what county. You don't know what I'm doing. And I would just try to plan things like, okay, I have a deposition outside the office. So after the deposition, I would just go back home just because it made my life easier. But I knew if I asked, the answer probably would have been no. So I just didn't ask. I just did.
And I will say this, I still very much encourage folks in my group included and myself included to get into the office at least a few days a week, because you can't replace that bopping into someone else's office and having that conversation that if you're at home, quote unquote, isolated, you would try to figure it out on your own. But the knowledge base that other folks have, it's immense. And you really just want to tap into that as a resource and make you a better person. And then they come in and ask for your advice as well. You don't want to be that, if you're not seen, you're forgotten sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I really love, hated COVID, but love what COVID did in that it made us all be able to have this kind of hybrid approach to things, which I think has been great.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm with you too. During COVID, I was at that point working from home quite a bit, but I wasn't used to having everybody else home as well. That was the part I didn't like. But now, the thing is, now I look back on it and I'm like, I kind of miss some of it. Like there's parts I miss our little walks that we'd go on, and some pieces I miss. I do not miss online school and managing that. But there was some
not fun.
No, it was the worst. I was so stressed all of the time.
Yeah, it's like, who's going to school, you or me?
Yes. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing now and where you're at now, though.
So I am with the Baldwin Group, their construction practice. So now where I had kind of previously been, all over, all different industries. I've really, honed my craft, so to speak, within the construction industry. So I am the director of claims for our construction practice. So in addition to, handling a book of business where I have clients specifically assigned to me and I assist with, the claims and advocacy on, their behalf, I also run our department and, try to set things up from a strategic standpoint, education, policies and protocols, things of that nature. So yeah, it's been good. It is good.
So I've worked in a lot of construction claims, and what I've always found though is it can vary so much between different companies as to the sophistication of their contracts and the response to claims. Like much larger companies might be better equipped when they get hit with claims, and then you have smaller outfits that their contracts just might not be as ironclad as some of the bigger players. So what have you found? Like, I'm sure you've encountered this. I'm sure you see both of those types of entities come across your desk. So how do you handle some of the less sophisticated entities that might not have these like ironclad contracts that sometimes does like leave them open to extra risk?
Yeah. So for us, we take a lot of pains to go through our clients' programs and their risk management programs and understand what their contracts say. If they're a downstream party being a sub, we want to make sure that they know what sort of liabilities they've accepted. If they're the upstream general contractor, the GC, we make sure that their contracts are tight and that they are able to, tender down to the downstream parties. We, give recommendations with respect to what sort of endorsements they should or should not accept. Because your contract can say one thing, but if a sub doesn't have a particular endorsement on their policy, they just don't. If they don't have the coverage, they don't have the coverage.
Yep.
So it's not only just obviously making sure that we can attempt the risk transfer and get it taken care of, but also, making sure that if we're unable to transfer, that the client is still protected, right? That's ultimately the goal, and making sure that they're protected and that their balance sheet and their assets at the end of the day are going to be okay.
Yeah. But it is something that I realize, or I've come across quite a bit, is like the subs. It happens more so with subs, is that they don't always appreciate the downstream risk that runs to them.
And it's not unusual or abnormal. I wouldn't necessarily get involved in this piece, but our account executives would, where they might get on a call with a subs broker and explain to them, this is why you need this endorsement. This is why we're requiring this in the contract. So sometimes we take it a step further where we're not just educating our client, we're educating their subcontractors and those subcontractors' brokers. It's very common, especially some of the smaller subcontractors where they are with a smaller broker who isn't maybe necessarily as sophisticated, and they don't even understand the risk that's being accepted.
No. And I mean, I comment on it because I see it so frequently with these subs that they themselves not be sophisticated, and so they're just kind of taking the contract as the contract and not appreciating the risk that they're signing themselves up for.
And we also have, Megan, when we first had a conversation, I was explaining to you a number of our general contractors are what are considered CSIP sponsors. So contractor insured insurance programs, or contractor controlled insurance programs. And that really eliminates all of this back and forth with tendering and the risk transfer, because they're sponsoring an insurance program that insures the entirety of the project from a workers' compensation and a general liability perspective. So because they're insuring that entire thing for their subs as well, you're not, as the GC, then trying to tender it down to the sub, because you've already agreed you're paying for that sub's insurance for that particular project.
Yes.
So we don't get this back and forth.
Yeah, and it makes, like we were talking about this, because it makes litigation for the defense so much more cohesive.
It really does. And a lot of times it prevents all of these, not just the tendering, but, bringing in someone as a third party because, they haven't responded to the tender. It just makes everything much cleaner.
Yes.
And there's not as much finger pointing then at that point. So the litigation costs are reduced significantly because everybody's on the same page. We're all marching to the beat of the same drum, right? We all want to make sure we're defending the actual allegations versus pointing the finger that wasn't my responsibility, that was your responsibility. It eliminates that.
Yes. And those finger pointing things can be the death of a multi-defendant case. Yes. I mean, that's like a plaintiff's attorney's dream.
And it costs significant dollars to defend those claims. No offense, ladies.
None taken. No. We don't want to cost you more money that you don't have to have.
Yep.
No, not at all. It's interesting. I'm actually in the middle of renovations in my home. We just finished the kitchen. We're about to start bathrooms. And it's also funny from this perspective, right? Like the electricians didn't clean up after themselves and they left dangerous things all over my basement, which is where my kids play. And I mean, no, it's like a silly example, but I said to my general contractor, like, I cleaned up all these little metal pieces, but like, what if one of my kids was down there and stepped on it? And now we need to, you need to talk to your subs and make sure like they're cleaning up after themselves and that I was like, you're going to get yourself into trouble. And I was like, sorry, I'll step back, take off my lawyer insurance hat and I'll go back to your customer. But like, it's just, they don't know, and they don't know what their subs are doing and they're not keeping control. It's a really interesting area.
My husband says it to me all the time. He's like, all right, stop being an insurance nerd and just live life. I'm like, I can't help it.
No, you really can't.
My kids are very mad at me because they want a trampoline. And my husband's a doctor. And they're like, that's not fair. Between you and daddy, we can't do anything fun. Because he's always like, in the emergency room, there's people who get hurt. And you're like, no, because of insurance. And I'm like, well, sorry.
Both.
It's like, we're just both fun killers. Sorry.
Yeah. But like, you go to a trampoline park because we know they're insured. Like when you sign a waiver, but
which those waivers aren't really any good anyhow. So,
Yeah, right. Exactly. So what are some of the bigger risks though that you're seeing like come across your desk for your clients more recently?
So we do work across the nation. So we have clients everywhere. I would say some of the tougher, risk placements for us, just because of, laws that are around in these jurisdictions, are New York labor law is a major problem for our contractors in New York. Carriers don't even want to write insurance there. It's not unusual where you're taking on $1 million retentions just to be able to get your foot in the door to get the insurance needed, because it's, a bit of an archaic law that's out there. There's a significant amount of fraud that's taking place around all of this. And it's just, they're difficult claims to defend. And they call it up there, they're calling it the fraudemic. There's a lot of talk. There's been actual investigative news reports that have been taking place about, it's almost like these fraud rings with quote unquote organized crime they believe to be behind it. So it's very tough for our clients when you know full well that someone was not injured, but they're going to get a plaintiff's firm who's going to take on their case. They're going to send them to that special doctor who's going to say, yeah, you need back surgery. And next thing you know, you're being sued for, $15 million. And that's normal.
Yes.
So that's one. I would say Florida is a tough jurisdiction from a completed operations perspective because they have something down there called 558 claims, where if it's a residential building, like condos, things of that nature, the building owners will come together and make a whole building claim and say any little thing that is wrong with the building, is because the contractor did something wrong. Has nothing to do with the fact that they didn't maintain or that, individual owners ran a bathtub and it overflowed. No. It's always the contractor's fault, right? Yeah. So, Florida is tough in that regard. California is California, right? They're always tough. And Pennsylvania is a really tough jurisdiction. I think you guys are probably super familiar with, those, the jurisdiction hotspots, I think, or hell holes. Jurisdictional hell holes, right?
Yes.
And they list it by state. And for Pennsylvania, it's not Pennsylvania, it's Philadelphia.
Yes.
They're tricky. They the jurors and the jury pools are, very liberal. And you can get pretty much any reason. If you've driven a vehicle through Philadelphia, it seems like there's reason to be in the Philadelphia jurisdiction.
Yes.
It's tough to get, once you're in it, it is really tough to get out of it.
It really is. And I think it's a lot of it's the judges. It's for me, it's less the jury pool and more the judges making the appropriate decisions on motions, and things just kind of fly through. There's not thoughtful consideration to motions. Things get rubber stamped denied. Getting out is so hard, even if you're doing a motion to transfer, motion for non-form non-convenes or whatever, it's very difficult to leave Philly. But even so, even the counties are getting harder.
Yeah. And I think, to your point there, where the judge is an expert, they understand what you're arguing, to then say, oh no, this is a matter for the jury to decide. They're not understanding the intricacies and the nuances of what's being discussed. They're not trained the way a judge is, or the attorneys are, or a claims adjuster is. So for them, it becomes even more difficult, and it becomes more of a, who do you like more? Who's more credible? That's what it boils down to, regardless of whether or not, Johnny tripped over, a ladder on a construction site. It doesn't matter. It's just who do we like more?
Yes. In fact, I'm not going to name names, but a few years ago, I was on the excess layer, so I had to monitor a trial, and after the jury came back with their award, and we pulled the jury, and how they weighed on the case was directly related to the plaintiff's attorney's likability. It was like, oh, well, and by the way, they were completely wrong in their assessment. Like the plaintiff's attorney, they thought was like, oh, he just seems like a regular old guy. I'm like, he is so rich. Like, he's not a regular old guy. He's a very good attorney, but they're like, oh, it just feels like he would be someone I could sit and have a beer with. I'm like, you probably wouldn't. But that was the that they were swayed by that. And then when they were talking about the defense attorney, like, oh, he seemed really, really fancy. I was like, compared to him? I was like, but that's what they were basing it off of.
Yeah. So it's hard. And that's the thing. The jurors just sometimes, especially when we get into the nuances of construction and contracts, and they don't understand what we're talking about. It's not fair to them either, right? It's not supposed to be a knock against them. It's more just the reality of it. And they don't understand. They don't know.
Yeah, no. Yeah. And frankly, they probably all just want to get out of there, which I don't blame them.
There's that too.
But I don't have the solution to how to make the system better.
Yes. No. That's a pay grade way above mine.
Yeah. Multiple. And I wanted to touch back on what you're talking about in New York, though, because this has come up quite a bit with people I've had on the podcast. And I had a conversation with someone yesterday that we talked for 20 minutes about the issues going on in New York and the fraudulent claims. And they were saying the same thing. It's just like you're almost forced to overpay to make it go away.
Yeah, it's tough. I don't know that I've seen it specifically on a claim. We know it exists, but there's also all of this third party litigation funding that's swimming around out there, right? So, and you're not required to disclose that. So it already puts the defense at a disadvantage because, the carriers very much, they have fiscal responsibilities, right? So they've got to make sure they're doing the right thing from a fiduciary perspective. But like the plaintiffs' firms have this ability to bring on expert after expert, and they don't get paid unless they win. So who is funding this, right?
Right.
Enter the third party litigation funding. And we don't really know where it's coming from. We don't think. I mean, we do believe that some of it is not from the U.S. We believe it's being funded from outside. So it's tricky. But they're not required to disclose. So until I think that starts happening, and there's a requirement, I feel like it's just going to continue. Even if they're undocumented workers, if they're injured on a job site, they're still entitled. Even if it's completely fraudulent. We have, and it was all over the news, there was a situation where, and this was one of our clients, they had it on video, a guy walking down the street, puts on an orange vest, carrying a hard hat, climbs under the construction fencing and lays down. And then has his buddy from across the street dial 911 to be picked up by an ambulance. Because the first thing is you got to get it in through workers' compensation, right?
Yeah.
And then once you have your workers' compensation claim established, you can go after the mother load with the general liability claim. And you're like, how does this even happen? Like, we have video. And
right.
You're going to tell us that this guy fell from a ladder? It's rough.
So what ended up happening with that case?
It's denied, but it's being litigated.
Yeah. Ugh. And it's like probably in like New York City proper. So you're
100%. Yeah. Five boroughs for New York is definitely the toughest.
Yes. Yeah. They are just horrible.
Yeah. It's rough. And we all know it. We all see it. We know which firms are involved. And, there's a significant lawsuit going on now that's being funded by tradesmen, a carrier, going after a number of these doctors and attorneys. And it's interesting. A lot of these attorneys are like, I'm gonna withdraw from from being the representative plaintiff firm for these workers. Dropped like 300 cases overnight. You tell me that there's not something up there.
Yes, I did hear a little bit about this, and I think it's like maybe it's a Texas firm or something that came in, or it was like someone out of state or I don't know. I might be getting the facts wrong, but I thought there was something with a Texas firm that came in, and that's why a lot of these got dropped because they all seem fraudulent.
Well, there was one main firm who, they're the ones who dropped about 300 of their clients to, I don't know. It's just crazy. They are a New York firm. So then whenever they pop up on anything, we're like, red flag it.
Yep.
Like, this doesn't sound right. We all know. Yeah. It's tough.
Yeah. And I mean, and there's no shortage of construction happening in New York, right?
Exactly.
So, and I don't think the labor laws aren't going to change, I think, anytime soon. So I think everyone's stuck with that strict liability.
Yeah. And, and the thing is I feel like for so long, the plaintiffs' firms and the plaintiffs' bar have been so coordinated. Whereas I feel like the defense firms and the defense bar, we're a little bit more, we take our small wins, where we're not all sharing the information the way I feel like the plaintiff's bar has been doing. So we got to get a little bit more coordinated around that. And I am seeing a lot of that taking place now within the industry. There's a lot of legal symposiums that are taking place that are being sponsored by the carriers. And it's not just one carrier. All of the carriers are participating together in these symposiums as a way to figure out how can we all get on the same page and have a coordinated defense the way the plaintiffs have a coordinated offense, right?
Yeah. But I think it's so difficult from the defense standpoint. One, because I think it's just different companies, different philosophies, and then from the firm standpoint, I think there's this underlying feeling of competition, and no one wants to share. I'm not saying I agree with it, but I feel like that's that's why information doesn't get as coordinated and passed around as much as it does in the plaintiffs industry, because they don't care. They don't need to share. Right. And I feel like on the defense side, it feels competitive. And even between insurance companies, every insurance company has a different philosophy and a different approach and how they approach claims, so that it's not as cohesive.
Which is why I think it's been refreshing. I think it's been about the past 3 years that these carriers are all starting to say, hey, wait, this is an industry issue. This isn't it's Travelers, it's Liberty Mutual, it's AIG, it's, Hartford. All of the carriers are seeing this. So how do we get together and stop it, right? Because in New York, one of the things that comes up quite frequently is, the average New Yorker, well, why do I care about this? If the guy got hurt, he probably is owed something. The reason people need to care about it and should be concerned about it is because the building industry is now paying significant costs in insurance, which then makes the price of building go up. So then when, they're renting out the buildings, now the buildings have a higher value. The rents are higher. The goods being sold in those buildings become higher because you've got to pay higher rent. So it's a trickle-down effect that is affecting everybody. It's not just the mean insurance company who's, paying for this. It's everybody who's paying for it.
Yeah. The mean insurance company has been a theme of recent, which we won't dive into, but it has been a theme in the past few weeks.
Yes.
Or week and a half, I should say.
Yeah.
So what is your approach though when you have one of your clients and they have a claim, because you're hand in hand with the claims too, even though you're not with the insurance company, but do you act as almost not a liaison, but a counterpart?
Yeah. It's a good term. We are a liaison between the carriers and our clients. And we're advocates. We advocate on behalf of our clients to make sure that their claims are being given the proper attention that they need, that we're making sure we have the appropriate defense counsel, right? You're not going to put an attorney from, Indiana on a New York labor law claim. You're just not going to do that, right? You want to make sure that, any attorney who's handling your client's files are familiar with the jurisdiction. They've got, good ratings, and they do a good job, and they're communicative and making sure that the client understands what is happening. There's nothing worse than when you find out, oh my God, we settled this claim. Well, did you involve the client? Did you let them know that was happening? Between the adjuster and the defense counsel, it might've been the best settlement in the world. But if the client doesn't know about it, then it's the worst, right? Mm-hmm. So we really make sure we're advocating for our clients, and so that they don't have to worry about it. We're their outsourced risk management group, and we can, advise, guide, and give, proper perspective on the claims process and help them in that process.
And that's something I never understand either, though, because lawsuits and claims affect businesses and individuals so much. They feel it here, and also especially if it's not something they have to deal with so frequently, that if a claim is closed, it's good news. So give them the good news. So, and I understand it depends on the particular insured that how involved they want to be in the strategy, but some some are more involved in, the litigation strategy, and others don't want to be bothered. I mean, you have that plenty of times too. Just let me know where I need to be when I need to be there, and let me know when it's closed. But let them know when it's closed.
Yeah. And I would say for our particular client set, we are dealing with larger, more sophisticated clients. So they want to be involved. They want to understand, is there going to be a reputational impact to them? Is this something that could, other contractors or owners and developers hear about, and they want to know what the heck happened on that claim or what happened with that incident? It was all over the news. So we want to make sure that they're being protected and advocated for.
And what about like preventative risk management? When you're working with your clients, are you working, like, especially with construction companies? Like, I feel like there's a lot of preventative risk management that can happen, either whether it be in the contracts like we've talked about, or just like site safety and site safety procedures. I imagine you're working hand in hand with them to mitigate some of the risks.
Yeah, so we do have an entire loss, we have an entire loss prevention team who also works, our safety professionals and safety engineers work very closely with our clients to assist in establishing site safety protocols, helping with fleet management programs, any number of issues that might pop up from a preventative perspective. And they're very, very much involved. They're walking the job sites, with the carriers, with the client, both at the same time and on their own. We get very engaged. We also have, loss prevention roundtables where we're inviting clients in to teach them the latest and greatest loss prevention methods that are out there, and making sure that our clients are educated in the process.
Yeah. And do you ever find that you get some pushback when suggesting changes?
Absolutely. Yeah. And some of it, it's, when some of the things you're suggesting might be like a large capital expenditure, and maybe it's just not right for the client at that time. And, we'll keep bringing it up and keep reminding them. Eventually they'll see the light, especially when they have that claim that could have been prevented if they had installed, the 6-foot fall and the retractable lanyards and things of that nature. So yeah, it's certainly, we do bring that up to our clients all the time. We also engage in a process where we do a deep dive for our clients into their risk management procedures and policies, and really look at it and say, hey, are they missing anything? Are there some policies that they should be implementing that they're not yet? Is it, drug testing? Is it, return to work programs, things of those nature? And we assist our clients in developing them and implementing them.
Yeah.
And identifying which ones they need.
Yeah, because I imagine that can be hard too, because again, even though you're dealing with sophisticated companies, sometimes they're like, well, we don't need that. Like,
absolutely. Or they're busy building buildings. They might not have the time to dedicate to developing a particular policy, because you've got to make sure that your policies and procedures are compliant with whatever legal ramifications might be out there. If they have a large fleet and they have a fleet program, you got to make sure that it's DOT approved. If you're doing drug testing, you got to make sure that you're in compliance with whatever the state's allowance is for drug testing. So we help to develop those programs for our clients regularly.
That's wonderful, because I do notice that a lot of the construction companies, particularly the smaller ones, just don't know, and they don't know what they don't know, right? Because
exactly.
Expertise. And I know I do a lot of employment work, and sometimes I look at their employee handbooks and you just like slowly close them and recommend maybe they update them very soon. Because it is, it's so out of their comfort zone, as it should be. I don't know how to build a house.
Yeah. Well, and you bring up a great point, Jen, with like employee handbooks. They might have like something in their employee handbook and they say, we do this, that, or the other thing. And then you look at the individual actual policy that they're referring to. And that policy is not anything that they mentioned in the employee handbook. I'm like, your two policies don't line up here. That's going to be problematic if you have to explain that in front of a jury or a judge, why you say one thing and you do another.
Right. Yes. Because I think it's because they go to whatever website that is and just print out an employee handbook, but don't actually implement any of those policies.
They need Jen. They need Jen on board.
Yes, we see that all too frequently, unfortunately.
But also, like, I think you provide such an asset, though, because like there's a lot of construction companies or companies that are construction adjacent that they might have a primary function that they do most of the year, but I see a lot of them like during the winter they might supplement and do snow removal, but then fail to maybe add something to their insurance policy that might cover said snow removal, and then lo and behold, 2 years later, someone slips and falls on a property where they, did snow removal and there's no coverage because they didn't decide to let anyone know that, oh yeah, like we like to keep our employees busy in the winter. So we have all the stuff. So we plow too. Yeah.
Unfortunately, that happens all too frequently. We had a client prior to our getting involved. They were, a real estate and construction development firm, but they owned real estate, apartment buildings across an inner city in not so desirable neighborhoods. And they had a policy whereby their security guards were not allowed to be armed. And there was a situation that occurred where, the security guard had to use his weapon, right? And that was not insured because they never let anybody know. And they had a specific exclusion on their policy that prohibited their security guards from being armed. It happens.
Yeah.
I'd like to point out we were not the broker on that.
Yes.
We were helping. We took over from a legacy perspective.
Yes. And you remedied that very quickly. Moving forward. I see it quite a bit, in these snow removal situations. I see it quite a bit just because, and I get it. Like, I understand why you're doing what you're doing. And the owners might not think, oh, wait, are we covered for this? Like, they're not thinking about insurance. They're thinking about, hey, we want to keep making money. We want to pay our employees. We want to keep their jobs. They're not necessarily thinking, oh, is there coverage for this?
Absolutely.
Like the average person just isn't thinking about that.
Yeah. And to your point earlier on like contracts and things of that nature, a lot of times people forget the ancillary services that are out there that are being done. So you might be a business owner and forget to have a contract with your snow removal firm, right? Mm-hmm. And so then when someone slips and falls in ice in your parking lot, you can't turn around and tender it to that snow removal company because there's no contract in place.
Yes. Yeah. So, you like to be the snow removal in that situation.
Yeah.
I may or may not have something very similar to that as we sit here right now.
Yeah. Yep.
But again, that's where like someone like you and your department come in, because you're helping educate your clients as to, okay, like you might not be thinking about this, but we are. And that's why you're partnering with us, because we're here to help make sure that there aren't any holes and you are adequately covered.
Exactly. And I would be remiss in not saying when we as the claims folks see an issue or see a potential gap in the coverage or an issue with a contract, we are working very closely then with our account executive teams, our account management teams, and letting them know what we're seeing so that they can get things fixed quickly on their end from a policy issuance perspective or from a contract recommendation perspective. So when we're seeing it, we're in constant communication with our account management teams. We work very closely with those groups. And so we're always aware of what's happening for our clients.
Yeah. And I'm sure those clients appreciate it. That like they feel like, I would feel that they feel like, okay, like we have a partner in this, like, we're in this together. And should a claim come in, I'm not going to be all alone. I imagine like you're lockstep during the whole claim process too, helping them.
Absolutely. Prior to us becoming part of the Baldwin Group, partner was right in our name, and we felt very strongly about that because we feel like we are our client's partner. And we hear that feedback from them all the time, that they really do believe that we are a trusted partner of theirs, and they appreciate what we do for them. And we love our clients. We have some amazing clients. It's fun, it's exciting. You develop friendships with your clients. You're not just a business relationship. You get to know them really well, and they call me and ask me, "Oh, how's my daughter doing?" And I ask them how their kids are doing. It's nice. You really develop not just a working relationship. You develop a personal relationship.
Yeah. And do you get to, or do you often visit them? Because I'm sure they're all over.
Yes. Yeah, we do. We are with our clients on a regular basis. We are meeting with them. We would never hesitate to hop on a plane to go out to see our clients. We do have offices across the country where we try to, assign somebody who would be more local, obviously, right. but I handle accounts in Florida, I handle accounts in California, I handle accounts everywhere. So we are always on the move and visiting with our clients. It's an important part of the relationship.
Well, and especially knowing like like Florida, for example, like with all the legislative changes going on, and it's all very complicated and very much fluid and moving, and to have that strong relationship that they feel like, okay, like they can trust you, of course, but you're on top of these legislative changes, so you can address it accordingly for their policies. I mean, I talked to a lot of people about Florida, and I've been learning a lot about Florida and the changes going on there, and it's getting better from what I understand.
It is, and there were significant changes with statute of limitations and things of that nature, and what was going to be permissible for boarding your general damages and things of that nature. So there was like that quote unquote rush to the courthouse steps to get things filed about a year and a half ago now.
Yeah.
But now we're going to start to see the benefits of the changes that have been made. And there were changes that definitely needed to be done. There was some significant tort reform, and there's still more that could be done, but we'll take it where we can get it, right?
Yeah. And I like wonder, and I think the answer is no, but I wonder if anything is similar could be in the pipeline for New York with the labor law, because that's all, like, I kid you not, it's like New York labor law, like that's what I hear all the time. And it's very similar to the response you got like last year or 2 years ago with Florida. So I'm like,
yeah, it has definitely, I mean, labor law has been around since, the dawning of construction, I feel like. I will say there is now more than ever a very concerted effort taking place from all angles to get some reform with respect to labor law. When labor law was instituted in that first lawsuit that came out, that kind of brought up this statute, maybe it was needed back then, right, to protect workers more. But workers are very well protected in New York, and across the country, right? So I think what is being done now is taking advantage of an old law for financial gain. And there are a number of lobbyists that are working to really affect some change right now. It's slow moving. I don't think it's going to happen overnight, but I'd like to think it could happen over the next couple of years where we could make some headway.
Yeah. I mean, and that's exactly it, though. It is being used just for financial gain. I mean, it isn't serving the purpose of the intent of when it was created.
Exactly.
And
so many laws, right?
Yes, so many. Well, Erin, we are just about out of time, but I didn't want to sign off without asking you this, because I ask everyone who comes on this podcast this question. So knowing what you know now, what advice would you give your younger self?
Oh, that's a good one. Not really sure. I gotta
I leave it
say,
for the end so you're nice and tired.
yeah, I would say, if like, oh gosh, be open to change. Don't feel like you got to stay in a box, right?
Yeah.
And I would say, really, if you have someone who you feel like has your best interest at heart from a mentor perspective, really reach out to that person because that can be such a huge help in this industry in particular. I think having a really good mentor can be so helpful with bouncing ideas off of. I think in the past we were always afraid to go out and be open and admit that we're not knowledgeable on a certain
Right.
subject matter. It's okay. We don't have to know everything. Part of being a good consultant or coworker is saying, you know what, I don't know the answer to that, but I'm going to get you the answer, and knowing where to go to get those answers.
Yes.
So being open to a mentor, I think, is in this industry and in general can be hugely helpful.
Yeah, I agree. And I also I would say like I stay away from pretending like you know everything, because then
Agreed.
then you lose credibility, because no one knows everything. Like nobody.
Absolutely.
Like,
Absolutely.
like I would joke with a friend of mine, like we had someone like we both knew that would always like, oh, I know that, I know that, I know that, I know that. I'm like, you don't know everything. Like, it's almost like you don't litigate cases on the moon. Like, let's just admit it.
There is a phrase that I use quite frequently, and because I feel like it applies to so many people, and I've worked with people like this, and you know it immediately, and you want to say to them, if you think you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes. So yeah, it's okay to not know everything. You're not expected to know everything.
No, I mean, Jen gets humbled by her son every day.
If anyone knows the meaning of life, you let me know. Even Google couldn't help with that one.
I mean, what did you say? What was your
I asked him what he thought that the meaning of life was.
That's what I would have done. Yeah.
Reverse course and turn it on them.
Mm-hmm. Yes. He said happiness, joy, love, and then you die.
Okay. Well, he's not wrong, I guess. Like,
okay, I'll take it. Cool. Moved on.
And then what did Tupac say?
And then what did Tupac say before he
Yeah.
Deep thoughts of a 7-year-old.
Yes. Well, the smartest 7-year-old I know.
Sounds like it.
Erin, thank you so much for joining us.
Well,
truly
thanks so much for having me.
On. Yes, such a pleasure having you on. And look, the puppy was not loud.
No.
They're staring out the door. Actually, she is asleep in my slippers in front of the door right now. And the other one is looking out the door, protecting her.
Oh, that sounds lovely. Well, thank you again so much for coming on. Of course, for our listeners out there, if you like what you hear, please like and subscribe to Claims Never Sleep. You can find us on your favorite streaming platform as well as YouTube. Thanks for tuning in. Oh, thanks so much, Erin. So I love your background, even though I know it's a fake background, but I'm going to pretend like that's your real living room with your grandma.
I wish. And this was a background from this platform, from StreamYard.
Yeah, I know, it is. Yeah.
I was like, oh, look, I'm fancy.
Yeah. It's like,
I'm going to go tickle the ivories when we're done.
Yeah, I know. Oh, it looks so nice though. I'm like, this, it just right now it's missing a Christmas tree. Like, it totally you should be able to winterfy it. Like, it needs a Christmas tree somewhere. I don't know.
That would have been good.
Now I want to look and see what other backgrounds they have.
Yeah, Jen's like, gonna spruce it up back here. But yes, thanks so much. I didn't want to get into like even though all I'm paying attention to lately is everything that's going on with the United Healthcare stuff, but I can't look away.
I know. It's so sad. So sad.
I need, while we were on, like, a friend of mine just texted me. She's like, I found the whole manifesto. And
Yeah, supposedly he had like back pain or something like that and had to have surgery. I don't know if his claim was denied. I don't the whole thing just I don't know if it was specific against United Healthcare or corporate America in general.
And I think Megan and I were talking about it last night. There's something about his family.
When we were talking at the end, because I was like, we don't need to record all this. All right, we're gonna keep it brief because I've realized it's already 2:36. All right, hi everyone, welcome to this episode of Claims Never Sleep. I'm joined again by hang on. I messed up. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Claims Never Sleep. I'm your host, Meghan Henry. And again, Jen is here. Hey, Jen.
Hi. So happy to be here again today.
I'm so happy to have you. Even though you've had a day of trials and tribulations, you had a nice literal run-in with a buck this morning.
Literal run-in with a buck. I mean, 'tis the season in Northeast Pennsylvania.
I know. Is it deer hunting season yet?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Took one for the team today.
Yeah, driving home from school or school drop off at 7:30 this morning, and boom, see antlers right next to my face. So,
oh my god! It probably just shakes. Like you probably so shaken up too.
I was, and the craziest part of the story, I think, is that we just got my husband's car back 2 weeks from when he hit a deer.
As I said, this is what you get for living where you live.
You know, it might be pretty and it might be peaceful, but
there are hazards involved.
Lots of four-legged hazards, yes.
Well, so despite everything you've been through already today, thank you so much for taking the time to co-host with me today and joining me to speak with our guest today, which is Erin Pfeiffer. Erin is Director of Claims at Construction Risk Partners, and her and I caught up a few weeks ago, and we started talking about all things construction and contracts and, you know, the hot issues that she's seeing come up in construction claims and, you know, what she's seeing in states across the United States and just everything that she's learned. She started in claims or started in insurance and then moved over to a broker. And now she's on the broker side. So she has a wealth of knowledge to share. So with that, let's bring her in. All right. Did I ramble too much?
No, it was good.
Right. Okay.